This is First Edition, a GE video magazine.
Hello, I'm Bill Stewart. Welcome to First Edition. We'll start this First Edition with a report on GE's performance. During the 80s, GE earnings have increased every quarter. In 1988, earnings were about $3.4 billion on revenues of over $50 billion. Return on share owner equity reached 19.4%, up almost a point over 1987. Operating margins grew, so did total cost productivity, now growing at a rate 3 times the national average and accelerating. By virtually any measure, they are results GE people can be proud of. You can read more about them in this year's annual report. But this company is more than debits and credits, and so is this First Edition. It's a report to employees about issues facing them. Helen Gray has this story about an impressive performance and the people who made it happen.
I think that most people really believe that the changes that have been made are good and were necessary. But that doesn't change the fact that they feel less secure, and the whole morale business is not what it could be.
We do have a pretty solid position, and at least we know where we're headed.
I think people are beginning to change their perspective that you can't rely on an external force anymore.
We are now #1 in the marketplace, and our problems and our concerns are how are we going to maintain that?
Depending on where you sit in GE, you might say the 80s have been both the best of times and possibly the toughest of times. For GE businesses, the 80s were the decade of becoming #1 or #2 in their markets. Today, most of the 14 key businesses are. In the 80s, strategic dispositions generated $9 billion to fuel $16 billion of strategic acquisitions. Big headlines in 1988 included the acquisition of Roper Corporation for its fit with GE's appliance business, Borg-Warner's chemical business to further the worldwide clout of GE Plastics, and the acquisition of Montgomery Ward's credit card business by GEFS. In the 80s, joint ventures and alliances became critical as the world moved faster, grew smaller, and globalization became a reality. In 1988, agreements between GE Lighting and Toshiba, GE Motors and Bosch of West Germany, and an expanded alliance between GE Electrical Distribution and Control and Fuji all strengthened those businesses' worldwide presence. And in early 1989, 4 GE businesses got a leg up in Europe with a series of agreements signed with the General Electric Company of Great Britain. The 80s were also the decade when GE invested close to $16 billion in its 14 key businesses, and the time when the company began saying goodbye to the old bureaucratic ways of the past. Layers went away. In their place, a lean and agile company began to emerge. The 80s have been the decade of a strategy consistently implemented, but that doesn't guarantee it's been consistently understood, says GE Chairman Jack Welch.
If I had a choice, I'd talk to every person in this company. What we're trying to do is to get everyone here to understand our vision, where we're going, the whys, why we're asking them to do what we're asking them to do, and hopefully what's bothering them, to listen to them about the concerns they had.
In a presentation Welch calls the GE growth engine, he characterizes the GE of the 80s and beyond. In short, it recognizes the 14 businesses for either generating high earnings or cash, although businesses can have different roles at different points in their cycles. 3 of the current earnings generators are GE Financial Services, Medical Systems, and Plastics. They provide the GE growth engine with its thrust. The cash businesses generate the fuel for this high-performance engine. Even with their different roles, all 14 share 3 common traits. First, they're all focused on being the dominant player in their markets. Second, they're growth-oriented. Third, they share a commitment to productivity. From 1981 to 85, GE productivity grew from 1.5% to 2.5% per year. Beginning in 1987, it jumped to 4 to 5% a year, and 5 to 6% is forecast for this year and into the 90s. And that's important because every 1% improvement in productivity translates into about $300 million in pre-tax earnings, which give businesses control of their destiny. This all results in a company that is growing at 1.5 to 2.5 times the U.S. nominal GNP rate. and a company that generates $2 billion of cash per year. The bottom line of the GE growth engine? All 14 key businesses matter, and all have a role to play. But Welch says there's one piece of the equation that needs work: liberating employees from outdated and unnecessary tasks. The rituals, reports, approvals, and tasks that no one wants, uses, or needs, and no one really knows why they exist.
It always reminds me, imagine if you move from one house to another after living there 115 years. Look in your attic and look in your basement and think what you'd be carrying with you to the next station. That's what this company's got. And now we've got to shed that so people can feel free to grow and reach their dreams.
Just how this will work, the action behind the words of eliminating unnecessary tasks, is a program called Workout. It was just one of the topics on the minds of 14 GE people, one from every key business, who participated in a candid, unrehearsed roundtable session with the chairman.
I'll turn it over to you now, because how good this will be will depend on how good you are.
Jack, in your GE growth engine presentation, we heard you mention a workout concept. And I was wondering what that is, because we haven't begun to hear as much about that in the field as I've heard about it. And I was wondering what impact you think that'll have on our businesses.
Well, I think without question that we have been talking since 1981 about being lean and agile, cutting out bureaucracy, delayering, delegating, giving more responsibility, a lot of words. And we've taken, through downsizing the organization, through restructuring, through other things, a lot of people have come out of this company. And enough of the work has not come out along with the people. Right. So we clearly have an issue now that we certainly can't add the people back. We now have got to do things simpler, faster, and smarter. Words, I think, aren't enough. So the idea of the workout process is to formalize, to, in a way, put a bureaucracy around taking work out. But the real issue is this. The way it's going to work is we're intending to have a facilitator in each business. They will meet with 140 people 6 to 8 times a year and the leader of the business. The first half of the day will be somebody else explaining the vision of the business. The next 2 days will be spent with a team, a group like you, only 140 of you, trying to find out what you can do to improve your quality of life, what you can do to help each other improve their quality of life and get things done in a simpler way, and what you need help from the leader on to make things happen. So the idea then is on the last day of this 3-day session, which will happen 8 times a year, the leader comes back in the session, and you now have a half a day saying, here's what we can do for ourselves. We can get rid of this report, that report, this. We can delegate more responsibility to us too. And 3, we need your help on the following 10 things to empower us to do these things. So the idea is to do 2 things with this. Simplify work, take work out, improve the quality of life, and on the other hand, improve the communications by making this forced interaction 8 times a year between the leader of the business and 140 people. So it'll vary by business, and it won't be a cookie-cutter formula. But in the end, we have to put some process behind it, exhorting people to delegate more, and exhorting people to delay, exhorting people to drop reports. It doesn't happen.
How many years do you think it'll take to get this fully implemented?
Oh, I think in 3 years we will really have a working system, because we will have a faculty member at a business that is having the trust of both the workforce and the leadership, and he'll be able to, or she'll be able to, keep things moving where people can talk. This only is solved by talk. This is only solved by people wrestling out the issues.
We delayered, and certainly it probably has some advantages in a lot of the businesses. One of the problems I found with it was that it gave me an opportunity as an individual to perhaps relate at a higher level, you know, to section level manager, etc. The flip side of that is that the folks working for me have a difficult time getting to me, because now my time is being absorbed by other things. Do you think that perhaps with delayering, maybe we didn't do our homework and maybe we left some things unturned in terms of how it should work?
Of course that happened. But in the end, we're in the bath. So we did at the company too. I mean, we got rid of the groups, we got rid of the sectors, and we dove in. Some were ready for it, some weren't. We stumbled around a little bit here and there, and now it's working. In your case, that's what workout's all about. Hopefully you will define what you have to do and what you don't have to do. And one of the things you got to do is work with your people. Develop them, bring them along, encourage them, nurture them. If you're a manager, your job is to flower the seeds, to grow people. And your job is not to count the same thing 8 times as somebody above you's counting 8 times, as somebody below you's counting 8 times. Now, that's what this whole process is going to try and get at. Most of us, it takes a lot of self-confidence on your parts to let go. Letting go is one of the biggest growth experiences you get in life, and it's hard to do. It's hard for parents to do with kids. It's hard for all kinds of events. That it's hard for you to do with your job. You're afraid they'll make a mistake and then it'll come back on you. So you double check, etc.
Many times, though, we manage by taking out the people first, because we can measure them, we can count how many people we have. We take the people off first, and now we start coming around with programs to try and get more efficient. But in the meantime, while we achieve all this, we have people working very long work weeks, like I wouldn't even think of going skiing or anything like that. And where do you...
You're not doing your job right.
Well, where do you break the line, though, when there's these urgent things that have to be done, there's nobody to delegate to? When do you just say, I've had enough, I'm going home?
Well, I'll tell you this, you've got to absolutely balance the quality of life with your job. And if you're good, you can do that. I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, it's absolutely all about that. This is not, we have no desire. You can't do some of the things you're doing. If you're working 90 hours a week and you can't go skiing, you can't take a vacation, you got a lousy job. That's a bad deal. You either ought to change the scope of the job or you ought to dump the deal. Nobody wants that. No, we don't want that from anybody. And you got to define your, I think what you got to do, I would suggest, you write a list down of the 10 things you do or the 50 things you must do. And start lopping off the bottom, put them down 1 through 50. And start dumping some of them. And the world won't come to an end, I'll bet, if the bottom 10 fall off. So, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but I know you just got to stop doing some things.
Jack, getting back to your engine story, you made reference to cash users and cash generators. And in a couple instances, you mentioned squeezing the cash generators to fuel the users.
Yeah.
Question is, will you allow a cash generator business to continue to fund investments in itself to promote its growth?
Of course. When I said we may squeeze when the environment looks very difficult. For example, in transportation and in power systems in the mid-'80s, we squeezed. They couldn't get an order if they bought one. Never mind sell one. So we just tried to get the cash out to keep them afloat while we survived. Going forward now, the only business in that shape in GE today right now is aerospace. Aerospace has the worst looking market outlook one can look at. Going forward, how many here think the defense budget's going up? You know, no way. So their market is defined, but very few people get their market defined for them in the paper. You know what your market's going to do. It's going down. Therefore, within aerospace, we are saying, we will give you the amount of investment you had last year. You pick program A, B, C, D, or E. You decide your priorities, okay? Now then aerospace has to go home, sit at the table like this with all the general managers there of the businesses, say, here's how much money we got. Where do we want to put our chips? Without question now, the biggest transition we have had in trying to explain this to people, people think they hate the business. It's a bad business. We went through that in power generation. We went through that in other business. That isn't the question. Big businesses have different points in their cycle. As long as you're number one, that's why you want to be number one. Because you can live through things like power generation did and like transportation did.
Jack, in your growth engine presentation, you mentioned that you compensate people in the high growth businesses differently than the cash generating type businesses. You know, being from the type of business that doesn't experience the excitement of high growth, I'd just like to know what the differences is in compensation.
Well, no, I didn't say that. What I said was we have to put systems in place that reward equally. Whether you're a fuel person, which is what I call cash, or a thrust person, which I call earnings. One of the things that I know in GE when we got this company, things they didn't do, they didn't give management awards. Now we give out $30 million a year in management awards, $20 million a year in management awards. Now you give that out hopefully with goodwill, because then hopefully good people are giving it out because I don't give it out. It seems to me we are trying desperately to push rewards down to where they count.
As you increase the circle of people you include, who are you looking toward next? Is it people like us? Is it middle managers? Is it just senior managers?
We'll let every business come up with its own pay plans. We're letting bonus plans go in any way you want to put them in. Now, hopefully we're going to have these bright people out there doing it right. Some won't. We'll step on it sometimes. We'll do it wrong sometimes. But if we look at it half full, think what we got. We're doing things we never dreamt we'd do before in a bureaucracy. We're doing all kinds of exciting things to reward people for their contributions. Our job is to flourish, to let people flourish, to water the seeds, to watch them grow, to excite them, to encourage them. That's what our jobs are.
People in the United States basically feel that big business is short-termers. They want to go in and put in a quick fix and forget the long term. And there's a true concern that maybe GE should invest more money in the United States in plant and equipment. And I'd like your comment on that.
In the United States?
Yes.
No,
in our plant in the United States.
We will invest in a global marketplace for the success of the global lighting business. And we will make the investment decisions in country A, in country B, or country C. Let me give you a little example. General Electric had profits outside the United States equaled operating profit of $2 billion. That's 35% of the total profit of the corporation. The international marketplace is a critical place for us. Our trade balance this year was positive $3.3 billion in a country that had a negative balance of $100 billion. So we gave $3 billion positive because of our competitiveness. The country was down the drain 120. So that $3 billion surplus was because you people and your associates in the field were so competitive. And every $1 billion translates directly to 10,000 GE jobs and about 15,000 jobs around the community to supply the jobs. So your competitiveness ended up with $3 billion of positive. U.S. wouldn't have a trade problem if every country was as competitive, every company was as competitive as we are. Wouldn't have an issue. Have an enormous surplus. Our surplus today is up 50% over it was a year ago. So we're getting more competitive. Our products are more successful. And we're gaining more share around the world. It's an important part of our story. You can't think about this business as a U.S. business. It's a global business, every one of them.
I agree with you. One other point, though. I think that we have emphasized the growth in Europe and Asia, and I totally support that, but I think to some degree at the expense of the U.S. market. And I think that you know, the acquisitions, as good as they are, they absorb resources in a time of having to do more with less. I'd hate to see the U.S. market, which put this business on the map, in any way compromised.
Now, let's not use phrases like the good old. It's like when I first dealt in the power gen, and when I first got the job and I traveled around the country. Do you know what Schenectady did for GE in turbines in the 30s? Look, who cares? The global market doesn't care what Schenectady was like in the 30s. It's not important. What's important is we're competitive. You could never have grown the medical business from $1.2 billion to $2.6 billion in a flat market in the U.S. You couldn't do it. Now you've got all these jobs that didn't have to go because you're exporting CT and MR from there. You have sold to Europe a significant amount of MRs and CCTs this year. That created your growth in Milwaukee. So you created jobs in Milwaukee by building CTs and MR and mailing them to France. Now, you would like it in Milwaukee, and I've told you this before, if the French would say, thank you very much, and we'll continue to give you 55% of our market, and we don't want to give you any of our products, and our employees don't have to work, we'll just import your products. The reason they gave us 55% of their French market is so they can employ 5,000 French people in their factories. Now, the quid pro quo of that is they'll buy our CT, they'll buy our MR, they want us to buy their mammography, some of their X-ray. In order to be a global player, you've got to be a good citizen of every country you're in. You can't just be an exporter from the U.S. and think somebody's going to buy your product. You're going to sell nothing. The only way you get the product is by providing jobs for the people of the country that's there. And that's how you grow. We got the two businesses, we got a huge company, we're screwing it up here and there, let's make it all work now. And let's not talk about the good old USA or the good old this or something else. Let's talk about a global business and a global market for the maximum job security of the most people. And let's grow the hell out of it.
Jack, in the global marketplace, certainly Europe 1992 represents a major challenge. And just recently, GE announced an agreement with Alstom and GEC and for a joint venture company. And I understand part of that is a sharing in technology. How do we protect ourselves from a technological advantage perspective and also balance our need to enter into those kinds of agreements to protect our marketplace?
It's a wonderful question. You've got to keep ahead of the curve. If, I'm not sure of all these numbers now, you'll know them better, but the 9F, I guess, is our most advanced right now. If the 9F is the last one we're ever going to invent, and it's the best of the class, and it's the end of the technological envelope, we've given away our technology in order to get markets. If the 9F will be quickly yesterday's technology, 2 years down the road, because our engineers are doing the 11F or the 12F, we'll win the ball game. If you're at the end of the game, though, your question's terrific. I mean, it's a question then, do you get more market sharing than you'd get sitting home and hunkering down? The game is this. If I can make one point, you can't hunker down and put up the walls and say, I love America. We love America. That's why we got a $3 billion trade surplus. We're doing very well by being competitive and exporting. But you can't get it by making believe the outside world isn't there, just clamoring for every order that's out there.
Well, is there some concern about how big of a share we get offshore in our markets?
Oh my God, I want as much as we can possibly get. The more scale you get in this game, the more chance you get to control your destiny, and the more job security it means for all of us. Leadership gives you control of your destiny. Productivity gives you control of your destiny. Then you can control share and price. I mean, in the end, productivity says you don't have to call in the sales manager and say, look, we're in trouble on our budget. You go out and raise prices for the next 3 months. And you go traipsing out with your bag, and the competitors slap you around all day, and your share goes down, which has happened in lighting as we're trying to raise prices before. And now we can control our destiny there because we got the productivity, we're ahead of the game. And we say, well, we'll raise prices in this market, we'll lower them here because we got enough profit, we'll keep our investment plans going, and we'll still get our earnings. So, no, we want to get as much as we can from leadership positions. There's nothing worse than being third or fourth in a market. People say, why are you so hung up about number one and number two? Because you can't carry the other ones with them because they don't control their destiny. They always get surprised. Weak businesses always get surprised because they don't have control.
Jack, I have a concern about people. I see a lot of high potential people being hired into the company, and I think they're being given unrealistic career paths or projections of those career paths. And the other side of that, we're not hiring people that I think that we're going to need to do the trench work, the nut and bolt type things. And the high potential people that I associate with are coming in with those rather rosy career projections. They're with the company a couple of years and they get disillusioned and they move on. And that concerns me.
See, I really believe that a job in GE, in the GE of the 90s, is a very cherished thing. We're going to have a liberated company. with lots of opportunity, with people to go as high as their dreams will take them. We're going to shed bureaucracy. Now, it's tough to tell that to a young person who comes into aircraft engine. There they got 30,000 people. And so when you come into a 30,000 person institution, it's a huge corporation all by itself, until they change their culture and get more bureaucracy out of there, we're not going to solve the retention problem there. But to ever say we want to hire people, Ron, and this may fly in the face of good sense, but I'll say it, to ever say we want to hire anybody to do trench work is just not my dream of what this place can be. We want to hire people who want to dream, who want to reach, who want to have a great lifestyle, who want to ski and work and play and have fun and have a great, fulfilling work environment.
Career advancement is something, I guess, that's of concern to all of us around the table and those people that report to us. With all the downsizing that's occurred within the company, it's not as obvious now what we ought to be doing as far as career. What kind of advice can you give us in order to, for us to enhance our opportunities?
All I can say is you've got to be able to speak out. You've got to be able to articulate what you want. You people seem to be able to do very, very well, articulate what you don't like. You've got to be able to do that, though. And one of the things you got to be able to do is do it with your immediate managers. So you get a dialogue about what's wrong and what's right about your place. And you don't go home and put a fist in the wall, because you get it all out on the table with each other. And I know in big, large components, it's frustrating at times. I mean, and you've got to be able, I always use the example, why don't you go in to your manager with 5 things. You ask me to do these 5 things. Do you ask me to do these things because you don't trust me? Do you ask me to do these things because it makes you feel powerful? Do you ask me to do these things because I can do them all by myself, I don't need you. Why don't you go do something else? But that's the dialogue that's got to be going on, so that we open things up and we get people that aren't intimidated, who can go somewhere else tomorrow morning, who aren't staying here and holding on, who are just trying to grow here and trying to explode here, and who will challenge the system, who won't get frustrated, who will change it, who will make it better, who care enough to make it better. But I can't tell you to go here or go there or get multifunctional experience and all that nonsense, because there's a lot of breaks that come about. I'd say every time you get a chance to be a global player, go there. Unless it takes such a hardship on your family that it doesn't make any sense and you can't do it. But other than that, do it. Because this world is getting smaller by the hours, not by the days. Communications has put it all together like that.
As you look ahead, do we have any weakness that you're worried about as a company? Is there anything that you'd like to see done a lot better?
Well, I think without question that we have to, this is not just a term, I mean, we have to take the power and the resources and the reach of a big company and behave like a small company. Have the hunger, the drive, the sensitivity, the communication, the simplicity of a small company. We have to do that. And it's easier to do the first thing than it is to do the second thing.
Look out 10, 15 years, and you're looking back on GE as a business and also the country. What would your legacy be then? What would you like to see?
Well, I'd like to see a GE be a role model for large, powerful companies that do give everyone a chance to reach every single dream they've got. Our job is to give you, Jim, the resources to flourish, to give you the chance, to give you a first-class environment, and to be fair to you. If you don't make it, and you have to move out, to be fair to you on the going out part. Fair, compassionate, decent. But this is got to be the greatest job in the world if we do it right. Open, resources, invent, dream, drive. If we create that, we can be a role model for others. And I think we're well on our way to doing it. Now, it isn't all easy. It's hard. And filters cause problems. No one's wrong or right in this thing. But we can be the role model of the company that lets everyone, no matter where they come from, Salem, Mass, and Salem High School, and University of Massachusetts, can get to anything they want. And that's the end, what we're after. Making everybody believe that and feel it and be excited by it and enjoy it. It's a dynamite company where there's a lot of fun to be had. And for those of you who aren't getting it, you've got to get your priorities in order so that you get both fulfillment from the job and fun out of the game. Thanks for doing all this. I appreciate you coming in. I appreciate your candor, too. I know some of the frustrations you have out there. I had them all. That's why I know about punching the wall. But don't do it. Fix it. We want you to fix it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for watching First Edition. We hope you've enjoyed the program. And we'd like to hear from you as well. We pick up our mail at First Edition, GE, 3135 Easton Turnpike, E2B, Fairfield, Connecticut, 06431. Thanks for joining us.